Yesterday I finally returned to Noel Pratt's to collect my 35mm projector, and that is because the British Film Collectors Convention is coming up, and as I speak is in a couple of weekends time, so maybe I'll see a few of you there. That projector should be in operation. There's a few little things I need to get over with it because I haven't used it for almost a year now. I need to reacquaint myself with it, so I thought this was a good excuse to do a video and show you some of the different film gauges. We've got Interstellar at the IMAX, the BFI IMAX, coming up this weekend as I speak, so I thought I'd show you some genuine IMAX frames, 1570, and also some 70mm frames, 35, perhaps 16 and Super 8 too, so you'll get a good idea of how all these film gauges work. Stay tuned to find out more. Right, because the BFCC is coming up, I'm running the 35mm projector here, and I'm running it open matte. That's because I'm adjusting all the mattes at the back of the gate. So it's possible to see here what 35mm looks like when it's open matte. I get a lot of comments when people talk about aspect ratios and showing things open matte so you can see the whole picture. Well, really, you don't want to see it fully open matte, as you can see here, and hopefully I can show this in moving image. If not, I'll do a few freeze frames. But you can see on the left hand side the twin optical stereo tracks that make up the multi-channel optical stereo sound. So not ideal to see things in open matte. You very often get white borders, all sorts of things appearing, so that's why everything has mattes in it. Little blanking plates that you just stick to the back of the gate. So quite interesting to see, and I thought I'd show it here before we get into looking at things like IMAX frames, 35mm frames, Super 8, 16mm and 70mm. And to look at the frames, I'm going to be using the light box with the Spider-Man poster in it, because that illuminated section there I think will act as a great backdrop for each of the film frames. But you may have noticed that the cinema here is in a bit of a mess at the moment. I've got all sorts of equipment dotted around because I'm getting all the projectors ready for the BFCC, so this is all going to be cleared up once I've got everything sorted out. But there are a few other things. One thing I wanted to show you, because Trevor at Double Bill Movies let me have this HMV shopping bag when I said, cool, that's nice. And my wife looked at it and said, that'd make a nice cushion. So we've ended up turning all our HMV and FOP shopping bags into cushions, except for this one on the end, which was actually an item for sale in the Newbury HMV. So let's get on to the film frames. Starting with the 35mm gauge here. This was the standard in cinemas for more than 100 years. So, well, you can still see 35mm in places like the Prince Charles, just off Leicester Square, and quite a few other cinemas if you're lucky. And they do have festivals of film around the world. And if you get the chance, always worth going to see, because it is a different experience to watching something that's video projected. More natural is probably how I would best describe it. But that's the 35mm gauge. Now, the other one that I've really grown up with and love is Super 8, and look at the difference here. Now, if you can make out those tiny film frames there, I'll go in for a close-up if I can, the difference in size. But Super 8 is still remarkably good, and if anyone is coming to the BFCC and we get our enormous screen up that's 24 feet wide, that's a scope screen, so the 2:4:1 ratio, you will hopefully see how good Super 8 can be. It doesn't compare to most 4K discs or most of the Blu-ray discs today, but this was the king of home cinema for decades. Nothing could touch this. The closest we came for a lot of years was Laserdisc, and didn't compare to Super 8 because at the time you couldn't project it, and when we did, it still wasn't very good. This gauge is 16mm, it's standard 16mm, not the Super 16, which has a wider image going all the way over and occupying as much of the film as it possibly can, so no sound stripes, which means you get a much bigger image area, and that's why films that appear on 4K that are shot Super 16 are actually of surprisingly high quality. But compare that gauge, however big it is, to 35mm, and you'll see there really is no comparison. So anything that was shot on 35mm will be markedly superior, or should be, to that shot on 16mm or Super 16. And likewise now, and this is where I'm going to illustrate why the best releases on 4K are usually shot on one of the 70mm formats. This is a faded 70mm, and you'll see the difference in image area between 35mm and 70mm. It's significant. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but with this masked 35mm, I'd say it's about 3 times the size. So that's why 70mm, in particular here, I'm thinking of the 4K release of Murder on the Orient Express 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's why they are the best, and that's because you're starting with an image area that, well, the maths can be difficult to do in digital terms, but I would say that 70mm is around 10 to 12K. Now, if you think that is an enormous frame of film, then this is something I was given at the BFI IMAX. Now, this is masked IMAX, 1570 IMAX. IMAX runs horizontally, so it's a similar process to VistaVision, which was a 35mm horizontal, but this is 1570, so a 70mm IMAX. And if you see the difference here with running horizontally, that has got 15 sprockets along there for each frame. Now, this is masked IMAX, it's not really genuine, it's a blow up from a documentary of something that I don't know. But if you put 70mm against the IMAX frame, you'll see the 3 standard 70mm frames make up one complete IMAX frame, and that's why IMAX is so much better than anything else man has ever invented. And when you see those projectors operating, it really is quite incredible. They don't just simply explode, but it's the rolling loop that ensures that it doesn't, and that is worth looking up, the IMAX rolling loop. Here's Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. This was sent to me, well, these frames are sent to me by Gordon and Michael at the BFI IMAX. And look at this, standard 70mm, 3 frames to every one that makes up an IMAX frame. So even if you put 70mm this way around, you can see the difference in width. It's about 30–40% difference in width there between the 2 frames. And so that's why when you're sitting in a IMAX theatre and they're presenting a genuine IMAX print, you just can't believe how sharp it is. Up to this point, it is the ultimate iteration of film presentation invented by man. And if you haven't seen Interstellar in 1570 IMAX, or Tenet, or indeed Dunkirk, which was a revelation seeing that at the IMAX, almost a completely different film to what you see on a 4K or a Blu-ray disc, or in fact probably video projected in any cinema, then you really must make the effort. I think Interstellar this weekend is sold out again. It's the 4th time it's been sold out, but one of my subscribers, Jim Hurd, I do believe he's got a ticket going spare, so if you're seeing this before 23rd of April, then you've just got a chance. If you drop a message in below, try and hook you up with Jim. Otherwise, probably got to turn up at the box office and hope someone has handed tickets back. Here's another couple of frames Gordon and Michael sent me. I thought this one said it all. IMAX, and that illustrates the size of the frame, how fantastic it is. And this is another interesting one. I think a lot of us know the film Batman vs Superman. Well, on the IMAX leader, it was Superman versus Batman, so different title somehow. I wonder if that was a working title and they decided Batman versus Superman worked better. Here's another couple of frames from Dunkirk, and put together I think they make an interesting story, because this top one you can see completely squared off, and this aerial one, which I was astounded that they managed to produce the aerial shots that they did, you can see a bit of vignetting around the edges. So clearly they were pushing things to the limits to get those cameras on the planes, but I didn't notice this vignetting when I was watching the film at the IMAX. So, well, a genuine IMAX screen is so enormous you really wouldn't notice anyway, but I thought that was interesting. Last one to show, I think, is a genuine IMAX frame against the 35mm. I don't know what the size differential is there, but I would estimate about 9 times. So once more, you can see why IMAX is the most fantastic thing you're ever likely to see in a cinema today. So unless there's a great advancement somewhere in electronic products, Can't see that we're going to see anything better than that anytime soon. So, although we're not going to be able to show you any genuine IMAX at the BFCC, we are going to be able to show you, I hope, because we're going to have two projectors there, 35mm. And if you look at those and you think, wow, that looks rather good, just imagine what the 70mm and the IMAX 1570mm could look like by comparison. So before I finish up, I thought I'd show you Noel with my 35mm projector. We had a great time visiting Noel as usual, and if anyone wonders what sort of a 35mm collection he's got, well, at the moment there's some work being done to one of his storage facilities, and therefore his cinema was turned over to storage. And just look at all the cases in here, and indeed in one of his workrooms. There really is an awful lot of 35mm here, and a lot of titles I would love to sit down and watch with him, so maybe one day. So maybe I'll see you this coming weekend at the BFI IMAX, or maybe the weekend after, 29th of April, at the Chorleywood War Memorial Hall for the BFCC. Whatever. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to carry on creating content like this. Until the next video, bye bye for now.